Hey everyone, Eric Thompson here. Hope that you are doing well. Welcome back to the channel, ATS Film Review. This evening, today, this morning, this afternoon, at twilight, whenever you watch this video, as we consider number 79 on the AFI Top 100, The Wild Bunch. Suffice to say, you have here a pretty typical, standard, run-of-the-mill Western story, okay? Revenge, gangs, federales, you got the army, you got the Mexican army, you got generals, you got scheming Germans. maybe that's a little different. But you have, and women, of course, lots of booze and drinking and cigarettes and cigars, and of course, gunfights. And of course, trains and so forth. And so you sort of have in the Wild Bunch a microcosm of everything that made the Western popular. The Wild Bunch coming from 1969, if I'm not mistaken. And so somewhat in the waning period of interest in the Westerns, of course, the 50s and 60s, really when the spaghetti Western raged in American cinema. But that's precisely why I believe the Wild Bunch is on the AFI Top 100, along with some other very, very noteworthy Westerns, because of the influence and impact that Westerns have had in the American cinema. From very early on, and of course up until today, when we have masterpieces like True Grit being made, and other ones that are not so good, like Appaloosa or 310 to Yuma, although I like that quite a bit. What was the movie? I meant to go look at it. I'm not prepared very well for this review, but I wanted to keep going. That one with Liam Neeson and Pierce Brosnan. Do you remember? What was it called? I want to say like Valley. Seraphim Falls. Wow, that was a movie. I just remember the part. Well, I remember it quite well. We remember the part at the very end when Pierce Brosnan jumps out of the dead horse and stabs, or does he shoot Liam Neeson? Anyway, that's a spoiler. Let's see a spoiler alert. I'm sorry. Anyway, that's why I think it should be on the top 100, because it's a Western. And given the importance of Westerns in the American film canon, but also that's one of the very reasons why it is relevant for today. Because, of course, you're now, like I mentioned, you have your True Grits and True Grit and Seraphim Falls and 310 to Yuma and Appaloosa. A lot of films that are revisiting the spirit of the Western film while not necessarily being a Western itself. And it's the success and even controversy of films like The Wild Bunch that make those films possible. When it came out, The Wild Bunch was hotly contested because it is a violent film, especially for 1969. I watched it and was surprised by the amount of gore. I'm not surprised, of course, when I watch something by Quentin Tarantino, for example. Like, you know what's coming. You're just waiting for it to happen. But to see it in a movie of this type is very interesting indeed. But that, of course, is why it remains relevant for today, because it, while not condoning it, it gave a doorway for directors to express the violence of that time. Whether or not cowboys and Indians and miners and gang members actually led that much, I don't know. But it truly is, among many, one of the instrumental films that makes a difference today. Especially, I mentioned Tarantino, and he said himself that half of his movies are just Westerns. You know, Kill Bill is sort of a Western. Inglourious Basterds is definitely a Western. And maybe a more typical Western because it has a gang in it, a wild bunch, right? That's on a revenge quest. And indeed, we see that a lot now in action movies that deal almost strictly with revenge. Really, they're just rehashes of what Westerns have been doing for decades and decades and decades. You know, and I'm thinking, of course, of the John Wayne classics and the Clint Eastwood classics, which are just rehashes of the same basic idea. But, of course, in film, you know, this is how it goes. And there is, I was struck by something in this film, in the spiritual sense. I wasn't looking real close to it. I hadn't seen the movie before, but I did want to gaze a bit into it, and I was struck by the way that these men in the Wild Bunch, in both gangs, without saying too much, led lives of lawlessness. And on one hand, I kind of found it appealing. You know, I imagined a life of freedom where I didn't have to answer to anyone, do anything I didn't want to do. You know, my life was my own to lead. You know, and I wasn't responsible to anyone. And also, you know, I didn't have to side with any code of conduct or constitution for living. And in one of the scenes, the Generalissimo asks Pike Bishop. He says, you know, are you on the side of America? And he says, no, we're not on the side of America. And he's lying, of course, just to get in favor with the general. But that is sort of where they're at. You know, to be a gang in those days, to be, you know, to live that lifestyle was to truly live a lawless life. And it immediately brought me to the Christian experience of those who feel that they can live lives of spiritual relevance, but live it lawlessly. And this is an old predicament, okay? We see it in our times, of course, in obvious ways. People who want to be spiritual and have spiritual experiences and call themselves spiritual or whatever, but they don't want to apply themselves to religion. Perhaps you remember that very, very famous, maybe even infamous video that went around YouTube, I love Jesus but hate religion. And some would say that that young man who made that video and so many of the people who supported it are lawless, that they want to love Jesus and be cool with Jesus, but they don't want the law that Jesus brings down, or they don't want to subscribe to the rules that Jesus offers to us. It's an old, old issue, and St. Paul wrote to the Corinthians, to the church in Corinth, and urged them to be careful about this. He says this in 1 Corinthians 6, verses 11 through, looks like 15 or 16. He says this, I'll read it real quick, but here's the references down below. Our mouth has spoken freely to you, O Corinthians. Our heart is open wide. So we're speaking honestly. You are not restrained by us, but you are restrained in your own affections. Now, in a like exchange, I speak to you as children, open wide to us also. And so, of course, Paul is really just saying, look, you know, you're having a hard time getting beyond yourself. I'm going to speak real plainly. This is what he says, you know, to the believers there. Do not be bound together with unbelievers. Okay? Here it is. For what partnership have righteousness and lawlessness? And Paul could have left it there, but he goes on to give other descriptions of this paradox. Or what fellowship has light with darkness? It's pretty simple. Or what harmony has Christ with Belial? Belial, of course, not just from Diablo 3, Scott, you know what I'm talking about, but you know, Jesus and the devil. Or what harmony has Christ with Belial? Or what has a believer in common with an unbeliever? Or what agreement has the temple of God with idols? For we are the temple of the living God. Just as God said, I will dwell in them and walk among them, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. What Paul is saying here to the unbelievers, he's saying, look, if you're going to follow the law of God, if you're going to follow Jesus Christ to the end, you can't mingle in with those people who stand for something different, with those people who don't care about what the church is teaching, what the fathers, what the leaders, what the elders of the church are asking. And so this, of course, you know, we're talking, I mean, 2nd century, you know, AD, you know, 1st and 2nd century, very early on, there were people who wanted to be in the church, but didn't want to follow the rules, right? Didn't even want to respect the rules. They just wanted to be lawless, and yet, you know, believe that they could have a relationship with the divine. God calls us to something more than that. And in my life, sharing maybe a kind of personally, I've struggled with finding a way to bring a balance between the two. I don't want to live a lawless life. I don't want to live apart from God's law or God's teaching, but at the same time, I just have a hard time fitting myself into these rubrics, these forms, right? These maxims, these expectations. And at least one thing that, let me see if I can't pull it up for you real quick here. Sorry. Where is it? Oh, whatever. That's somewhere else in the Bible, wherever it is. I guess you know. But I'm sorry. I should have just gone to Google. Second. It was like next door to where I was. I'm sorry. 2 Corinthians 3:6. The letter kills, but the Spirit brings life. That's sort of been my heart, believing that the words, the exact words, if followed just because they're words, will drag us down. But to try to understand not only what the Spirit of God is doing, the mystical Holy Spirit, but also to understand what the spirit of these words mean. The Ten Commandments, the Beatitudes, the Golden Rule, all of these different things. And of course, for a Catholic person such as myself, the Catechism and the teachings of the Church Fathers and the admonitions of Pope Francis and Pope Benedict and John Paul II, all the way back to Peter, to try to understand the spirit of what they're saying. And to not just follow along mindlessly. That's almost worse than lawlessness. Just blind, passionless, soulless obedience, you know. But to be brave enough to let the creativity and let the natural curiosity ask questions. Why? Why are we doing this? You know, how is it benefiting my life? How am I benefiting the world and the kingdom of God because I'm following these rules or whatever it is? If I'm choosing not to be lawless, I'm choosing to come under the law of God, the teaching of the church. I don't want to follow the letter just because it's a letter. I want to follow the law because God's Spirit is in it. And by bending my life, conforming my life to these divine expectations, I'll become better. I'll become better, and hopefully I'll draw other people to Jesus as well. This is not an easy topic. I of course, will no doubt hit on it again at some point in the AFI Top 100, because this obviously persists in so many movies that struggle between, do I do what I want, or do I do what's expected of me? And indeed, unfortunately, as we see in so many movies, the lawless do not last. Sometimes they do, but in movies, not very often. Because, of course, the good guy lives by the code of conduct, right? I mean, that's the thing. And so that's for your consideration. Just to sum up, though, if I may quickly, we're looking at St. Paul's admonition to the Corinthians, to the believers there, to stay away from the lawless. Precisely because they're just going to wander wherever they want. But St. Paul is admonishing me and you and everyone to just stay on a track that's going to lead us closer to Jesus Christ, closer to each other in the fellowship of Jesus Christ. And so that's why lawlessness is so dangerous. Freedom is great. Freedom is incredible. And freedom allows us to explore the law of God and to get to its roots. Why? To ask why, to have the bravery and in faith, in the name of God, to ask why, but to still have the grace to choose, to obey, even if we don't understand, but believing, of course, that the Spirit will give life, the Spirit of the law and the Spirit of God. Wow. Lots to say. Like I said, a lot of words real fast there. I'm just feeling a little behind the schedule, okay? And I've been running around the house going crazy tonight. I got books stacked up. The DVD collection is there behind me, of course. My parents are here from Oregon, and so there's a lot to sort through and a lot to do, and so I'm sorry for the mess. Heart of Darkness and Love Poetry, and there you go, side by side. So there you go. Thanks for watching, friends. As always, number 78, Modern Times, coming up very soon. That's a Chaplin film, and so his first appearance on the AFI Top 100, but I don't think his last. I don't believe so. Like and subscribe to the channel if you care to. I'm very, very pleased with how things are going on the channel. Of course, always want to see more subscribers, always want to see more views. And I thank you kindly for sharing the video with your friends and your family, those who love movies, and maybe there's someone in your life who's a big Western fan and you want to share this movie with them, or who knows. But I absolutely appreciate every person that chooses to click on over and almost canceled the video, almost stopped recording there. But I'm going to do that now. But I surely do appreciate it, friends. And as always, really, really do truly, as my Western double shooter, double snap, hope that you're doing well. Thanks, everyone. Bye. I gotta calm down. I gotta freaking calm down.